Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Solar Sundays, brought to you by the Order of Fire and the Pater. The new Journal of Solar Culture, Volume 3 is out, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about LooksMaxxing. Ed, did I mention my my sinus region's been hurting a little bit? I was following the advice of some guy who said you could hit your cheek with a hammer, and that would fix, but it just hurts now. I don't know if I was doing it wrong or something, but apparently it's upon a little bit further investigation, it is actually generally considered inadvisable by most of the medical community to hit yourself in the face with a hammer. I didn't know that before. So, anyways, I'm still feeling
doing it for a different reason, though?
Huh?
Weren't they hitting their face with a hammer, like to Mumax or something?
Yes. No, they're trying to reshape their facial structure. I'm making a joke. I'm actually not hitting myself in the face with a hammer, although at times I felt the desire because my sinuses actually do really hurt. Not from hammers, incidentally. But we're here to talk about LooksMaxxing. This is a funny story. It's been kind of all over the news, at least in certain parts of the internet, with androgenic, who is a person and not an adjective, suffered generational aura loss as he was cortisol spiked by something mager. Basically, he was standing just looking like someone from Zoolander, and a sneaky bastard came up and stole his hat off because they thought it'd be funny, but it turned out the hat was also a wig. And the loss of his hair as well as his hat, like, it completely changed his appearance. And it wasn't just it was almost magical how suddenly he transformed from this like Greek god specimen into like factory worker from Ohio in like that. And I think part of it was the revelation of the illusion. You know what I mean? Like if someone is propped up by illusions and their illusions go away, like they actually puts them lower than if they had just started how they appear afterwards the whole time. But there's been a couple of names. Another name that goes around is this clavicular character. I don't know what it is with the adjectives as the first names thing. But anyways, there is a philosophy, if we can call it that, an approach to living, we'll say, among certain Gen Z guys that is like, you should be as just beautiful as possible, be as good looking as possible. Really, nothing else matters. My hammer joke was a reference to Clavicular, who has become somewhat famous for attempting to reshape his bone structure by hitting himself in the face with a hammer. Just extraordinarily pathological behavior. And it brings up all kinds of interesting questions about, like, first of all, what do women actually want? Do they care this much about men? Or are they doing it for women at all? Are they doing it for other men? Or are they doing it for themselves? And if they're doing it for themselves, is that really actually so bad? But like these sorts of questions all bubble to the surface. I guess in contrast to the claim that maybe they're just doing it for themselves and stuff, they seem to be of the universal opinion that everybody should be doing this, because if you aren't ridiculously good looking, then you're a loser. You're subhuman, in fact, as they like to talk about people. Sub fives are subhuman. So to me, I don't know, Ed, do you have any thoughts on this before I just ramble?
You were making good sense. It's a different thing. Whatever it is they're doing has a sort of, speaking of auras, it reminds me of drag or of trans in a lot of ways. Because
there's literally the wig, yeah.
There's looking good. Like when it comes to other men, like there's certainly in certain areas an emphasis on improving yourself, but it's like, okay, you're going to look better, more jacked or more attractive, but to other men that needs to come along with a process, like a journey, like
Yes.
the trials of Hercules. It's like there has to be work behind it and a greater purpose besides just looking good, which has its place. But also, those dudes don't really look good. They look weird.
Yes. So there's a lot to unpack there. There's like there's the sort of uncanny valley that many of these guys are approaching in their appearance.
Bingo.
Like many women who get like too much lip filler, they get the BBL, they get like too much makeup. There are women who are straight women, but they look like trans men just based on how they do their makeup. They can look plastic in a way that's very weird and actually turns you off. I don't know if women feel the same way about these guys, but there is the tranny thing is interesting because, like, what's wrong with transgenderism, really? I mean, it's an identity confusion question, right? It's like, it is something, there is something essential in being male and being female. And if you are a male who thinks you are a female, that is your aspiration for becoming is at odds with your being. You are born, your Geworfenheit, you are thrown into the world in a particular way. That is what you are. Now, there's a lot you can do with that. There's a lot of places you can go. But there are certain violations, and it can be a fairly thin line as to what is a we could say a valid becoming versus an invalid or pathological becoming. Because what these guys are doing is a sort of an act of becoming that is at odds with their being in some way. But it is true that people change, and people change for the worse, and people change for the better. Are they just improving themselves? And I think this gets down to the question of, like, what is it that we actually find attractive? Because what trannies often wind up doing is, what they are often attracted to is like a performative caricature of what they think the other sex is like. They actually have no sense and can't possibly have a sense of what it is actually like to be the opposite sex. Like, there's a funny story of a woman who decided to see what it was like to be a man. So she dressed up as a guy and went around, and she was not totally passing. So they go out, and then the film just cuts back to them returning. It's like, turns out guys get called fag a lot. It was like,
Yeah.
it's just a funny kind of humorous jump cut thing.
Yeah.
But like, they really can't understand. And I think there's something similar, not in the lack of experience exactly, but in the trying to become something you are not. It's hard to put your finger on it exactly. It's not quite like the trans, and it's not quite like stolen valor, but it is trying to pursue the appearance of attractiveness without going through the actions and steps that lead to organic attraction based upon a conflation of the appearance for the thing itself. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think that's what's going on, because when we're visually attracted to someone, I think, and there's a lot to this, there's a lot to you could say, but there's like, we're homing in on cues that signal particular features and particular qualities.
Yeah.
But if those cues get gamified by people who don't actually have the qualities that we want, like with some of them at a very base animal level, we're just drawn to the cues. We're like, we kind of can't help it. But it is off-putting, even if we're still attracted to the cues, that person does not have the qualities that those cues are supposed to represent. And I think that leads to that feeling of uncanniness and like wrongness. There's a sense of wrongness in the order. And insofar as there is a common look that stems from a common ideal that all these guys are sort of circling around, that like that will come to acquire a degree of disgust almost, I think, for many people. Karate Elvis says, Ed has a point. Many of these LooksMaxxers try to still lean, but they like to clown on the big guys who actually have strength. Yeah.
And when it comes to those cues, like, you know, you hear from people all the time that like, oh, they went on a date with someone that there was the hottest person they'd ever seen. And then it turns out they're disgusted by them. You know, they're totally not actually attracted to them after they meet them. You know, and you also hear, you know, we also have all experienced that those certain cues are there while there is a lack of anything that would be considered popularly attractive or mainstream attractive, and that person becomes extremely attractive to you because of all of the rest of the pieces of that puzzle. And backtracking a bit, you know, you were talking about, you know, women that are going overboard with sort of plastic and silicone and outrage, you know, hair and makeup and the long nails, you know, and then, you know, men will say, oh, I don't find that attractive. And what's the immediate answer? I'm doing this for myself.
Yeah.
Which means for other women.
Which is like it feels like a retreat, and it's sort of an insincere thing, because the reality that is sort of uncomfortable to say is that people do kind of respond to these cues at a subconscious level, whether they like to admit it or not. And we can be sort of disgusted and repulsed by something and attracted by it at the same time.
Yeah.
I think snakes can have that effect on people. People can look at it and be like mesmerized and afraid, but also kind of like, ooh, wow, it's so interesting. But like, oh gosh, but huh. I think uncanny people can be a little bit like that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the most like the first and most obvious thing that came to, I mean, there's a number of references that come, the number of people pointing to the beautiful ones mouse experiments by, I forget the guy who did it, some sociologist who ran a mouse utopia experiment. And if everything was like perfect and they were putting like cocaine in the water and stuff, and there was a certain portion of the male mice that just groomed themselves nonstop, and they became the beautiful ones who didn't reproduce at all, and they just became obsessed with this grooming for some reason. I don't remember the name of the guy. It's a fairly famous experiment. We don't need to get into it because a bunch of other people have brought it up in reference to these kinds of guys. But it is interesting to think of the LooksMaxxing phenomenon as not a cause, but perhaps as a symptom. I mean, it is a cause, as people going like pushing this, but like if it was a symptom, what would it be a symptom of? Perhaps we're in a sort of mouse utopia scenario of our own. Perhaps it's a symptom of increasingly online dating, where we're not getting to judge people's behaviors at first, but we're increasingly going kind of solely on looks and appearance, and not just looks and appearance, but two-dimensional profile pictures.
Yeah.
You know, so
where the whole experience, where there actually is not, you know, an online dating scene where the idea of actually meeting in person is, you know, either off the table or overwhelming for whatever reason. And so the entire experience is an online experience. I'm talking to this girl, right?
Yeah.
Not me. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, you know, I'm talking to this girl.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I've been talking to this girl, and that's where it stays. And it's, you know, and like Snapchat, I've never had a Snapchat, but I've been exposed to what it is. And it's like people having these online relationships via these quick photos that disappear, you know, with little one-line messages. Hey, baby, whatever, you know. And but there is not a real world experience. And then we also hear, according to data, that that generation is not having physical contact at the same level
Yeah.
as past generations.
Or
So
or it's being sublimated into a sort of pseudo experience, what do they call it? Not parasocial. Yeah, a sort of pseudo social experience where looking really, really good is like the way you get that, because that's all it is anymore.
and what, you know, and it's like, what, you know, what kind of things are like valued like currently
Mhm.
in a certain age group, and based on so much internet, uh, you know, it it's like that, it's like signaling of some type of success, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's
where for a while the internet was like, you know, the more pictures you had like laughing on the beach, even if your life was falling apart, you know, it's like you got the dopamine from the likes and, oh my god, amazing, you know. And now like it's shifting to like, how do I
oh,
look?
we should talk about dopamine, because part of the thing that's attached to this whole LooksMaxxing culture is a whole vernacular built around hormones. So like when androgenic got generationally aura mogged, or whatever the phrase was, the verb they use is he got his cortisol spiked.
Yes.
So it's like there's a kind of humorous and self-conscious Gen Z awareness of how gamified their own
Yeah.
chemicals are in this whole
Yeah.
process. They seem to profoundly understand that this is all a dopamine, cortisol, oxytocin game. Which is like a very strange place to be. It's a very utilitarian place to be.
Don't
Um,
forget serotonin.
yes, and serotonin.
Yeah.
And like, to me, where my brain goes is like that seems to be a symptom of the absence of grander narratives that are worth being a part of, greater stories to play a role in, because it's only in the context of a greater story that you would frame your understanding of the world and your place within it in terms of your dopamine and cortisol levels.
Yeah.
Now they could counter by saying, well, I mean, you only want to be part of some meaningful story because that will give you dopamine and oxytocin and stuff. And
Yeah.
it's a very like kind of postmodern understanding. And they're not wrong, but they are wrong in thinking that's how other people are thinking about it. Like you're not better than other people and like wiser and viewing things more objectively by choosing to look at the like physical dimension of causality rather than other dimensions of causality, because these physical dimensions of causality are not the only dimensions of causality. People don't just convert to religions or change political parties or whatever because of like chemical shifts. Like chemical shifts often correspond with it, but it can very often be a following tail rather than a leading cause.
Yeah.
It's just a choice in frame for how they want to view the world, which I think is a symptom of a lack of faith, a disillusionment in narratives generally. And if there isn't anything worth doing, well, you may as well just be. Maybe there is nothing better in life than being ridiculously good looking.
Well, and you know, I've thought about this a few times. There's something about it, something about the language that they use, and also the whole thing that reminds me of like a video game. You know, it's like there's a bar, you know, like, oh, life is going
Mm,
up, 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 up,
yeah,
up, and then, oh, you die, you know, generational aura loss, you know, went
that was
down.
an
And then you have,
HP bar hit.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that, you know, and that's the dopamine, that's the cortisol, you know, and like maxing, you know, they've gained a superpower that they can use to, you know, take out others, and then simultaneously, it appears as though that they're looking at anime as some sort of guide for how a person should look.
So I have a medical hypothesis. I'm
Okay.
I'm not a doctor. Right?
Come on, doc.
But I have a medical hypothesis. I've been back in, was it 2018, 2019? I wrote a blog post. I should post a link to it in the comment section. About depersonalization and derealization syndrome.
Yes.
Since I wrote that blog post, Mayo Clinic no longer talks about those as separate. They combine them together. When was this? 2019. I'll post a link to it in the chat in case people want to look at that.
I remember it, actually, strangely.
But basically, I put out because at the time, doctors didn't really know what caused it. Except they know that there's some correlation with certain psychoactive drugs, as you might imagine. I had experienced a degree of derealization experiences, not syndrome, nothing systematic, but derealization experiences from severe sleep deprivation when I was in the military, as you can imagine. But what I hypothesize is that people were getting more and more depersonalization and derealization syndrome experiences from internet use. And the way it works is, again, this is all speculative. This is me throwing something out there. What if our feeling of the world being real is tied to our experience of causality in the world, and our feeling of us being ourselves is tied to our own feeling of agency, of us being a cause of things in relation to our external environment. So what happens if you're online all the time? Well, if you're online all the time, if you're always on your phone, if you are invested in things going on online, then your attention is drawn to varying degrees, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it is divided and separated, and is increasingly, very largely online. You'll be walking around on your phone. You'll be walking around, even if you're looking around, you're thinking about stuff on your phone. At home, you're on your computer. Even if when you are walking around in the real physical world, you are paying attention to the physical world, you have devoted a large part of your attention to the internet and the online space. So it places you personally in that space. And with that divided attention, you lose track of causality. And suddenly the world takes on the feeling of a place where things just happen, like in a dream, for example. And because depersonalization is described as feeling like your body isn't yours, like you're along for the ride in a robot almost, or someone else is controlling your body, and or being described as being on autopilot. And derealization is the feeling that reality isn't real. It's a simulation or an illusion. I expanded on this to say that maybe belief in simulation theory, as popularized by Nick Bostrom and also Elon Musk and Scott Adams and others, might be a symptom of excessive internet use too. And the tie-in here is that if reality doesn't feel real, then the narratives that give shape and meaning to our reality will also not feel real. And so it leads to this place where maybe you may as well just pursue the health bars of, I guess cortisol would actually be a negative health bar. As your cortisol goes up, that's like bad. That's like a toxin counter or something.
Not in the morning, though. You want it in the morning.
Perhaps, yeah. Whereas I'm sure the science bros would know. Whereas your dopamine and oxytocin are like
Uberman. But yeah, agency is really important in because it's directly related to like self-determination. And self-determination isn't it's about autonomy, but it's also about relatedness.
Yes.
Which so the internet gets tricky in that regard when a sense of self and a sense of agency is tied in with simultaneously feeling autonomous and connected.
Yeah. The connection is an interesting one, and that's an etymological one because it goes back to the like the nous of Homer and of Odysseus in particular. The comrades who die are described as nepioi, which Acknowledge describes as the disconnected ones. They forget home. They forget their role in the story. And their own recklessness destroys them. Not just their face with a hammer, but like their actual lives. So the connection between connection and agency is interesting. I think a big part of the desire for connection is also tied in with the assumption that other people are also agents. Like, have you ever had the experience? I assume you've messed around with some AI chatbots, like whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Grok. Like, have you ever gotten into like conversations with AI chatbots?
I have a relationship with Grok.
Okay, nice.
We
Nice.
talk about language a lot.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's AI is so good for that. But have you ever had a conversation with? I just had this earlier today, actually, with an AI chat engine that you felt like you were getting really, really good feedback, and then suddenly the AI said something that revealed at like a visceral gut level that it was an AI in a way that kind of ruined the conversation for you? Have you ever had
That's
that
not
experience?
happened.
Okay.
No.
I was
You
I was
I've
getting Oh, go
I've
ahead.
told I've told Grok, wait a minute, you're completely wrong there because I already knew that one. And then a minute goes by and it's like, oh yeah, my bad. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah. I think it's when AI is trying to affect the tone and feeling of human communication, but then it says something that only an AI would ever say that reveals you're talking to a robot, and suddenly any like meaning that was like there subconsciously in your experience of the conversation just evaporates, or even retroactively. It's maybe not an experience everyone has had consciously, but I think it's I don't think I'm alone in this. And I was doing this earlier today, getting feedback. A friend is running Descending Odin's Throne and Holy Nihilism together as a combined works through a like 10 Claude agent tribunal, basically, that was creating like a steel man systematic criticism takedown of it. And the first round was really good, and it was a very thorough feedback. It taped out a 26-page criticism of my complete worldview, and I'm like, awesome, cool. And I went through and I systematically responded to all of it. I'm like, this is good, but misunderstanding the argument. This is incorrect. This is blah, blah, blah. And you just work through. The second round of response after that was like really weak. Like it was going really on the offensive and trying to be like almost mean, almost condescending. But it was like, it was putting things in quotes as if I had said it that I never said, like not even close. And it said, like, I'll try not to get too in the weeds because this is going back to LooksMaxxing here in a second. But like, I brought up a distinction that Kant made in order to go somewhere with it. It thought I was claiming Kant's position for myself, but Kant went the other way. So you're claiming this falsely. I'm like, that's not even remotely what I'm doing. My essay was disagreeing with Kant. And it was a sudden realization, like, you can't read that second round of feedback without facing the associative nature of the reasoning there. It's like, this is a robot. This is not a person. And it suddenly almost made the first round of corrections feel less valuable. They still are. Rationally, it still was higher quality, but the feeling inverted. Now, holding all that in our head, going back to the loss of feeling of agency and reality in a like derealized, depersonalized world because we're spending all our time on the internet. If projection is common, in assuming other people are like us, then it's very likely we're projecting our own feeling of lack of agency from a position of derealization and depersonalization onto others. And a symptom would be a decreased desire to connect with others because we're an NPC trying to connect with other NPCs. Like what is that? You have to take on an absurdist kind of, oh, it's just for fun kind of very black pill perspective to insincerely justify that. So I think internet culture in a few different dimensions might be behind this in an interesting way.
Which internet culture seems to be more. It's like relationships on the internet seem to more often be being about showing other people up as opposed to actually connecting or interacting or sharing ideas. Obviously there is exceptions to that, but like if you go on X, 90% of what you see is somebody either showing up, trying to show up another person or the world. There's so much like out into the void. Look at me. This way that I look is the best. And this is how I got that way. And if you're not doing this, you're doing it wrong. In fact, you're shit, Like there is so much of that. And not just in fitness, but people are doing it with food. They're doing it with like all these aspects of life. And it's not like, hey, let's talk about this. There are that, and it tends to be what appear to be the smarter, more intelligent people that you see on the internet, like an openness to actual interaction, like bring something to me. It's usually I'm spitting this out, and you're shit because you don't, you're not up to the message I'm giving.
Yeah, I guess there's two different lenses we could bring to criticizing this kind of approach from like an ethical framework. Well, there's a lot more than that, but two that come immediately to mind. You could take a sort of Platonic view that these guys are pursuing the appearance of a thing rather than the reality of the thing. Or you could take an Aristotelian view that they're pursuing an extreme rather than a sort of healthy mean. And the extremity is coming from an extremity in the other direction. It's always the guy who was raised with, borderline starvation situations at times that becomes like super obese later and like can't stop. Person who's raised in poverty and told they're nothing because they don't have money, that like becomes compelled to just make money and do business and sell more, like at the cost of everything else, at the cost of their sanity, their health, their family, and so forth. The person who was not very attractive and bullied for being a social outcast that goes and learns game and like pickup artistry from the most sociopathic actors in that world, and so on and so forth. Like deficiency breeds a desire for excess in the other direction, in one domain. And I think the first I'm sure there are more, but like the first iteration of this that I saw of extremity that I understood it viscerally when I saw it was David Goggins. I like David Goggins, but that's the problem. I think I like David Goggins more than David Goggins likes David Goggins. I think there's like a profound, if you read his book, Can't Hurt Me, like just the title hurts to read. Like, oh man, dude, but like Can't Hurt Me. That's like tearful, angry 5-year-old boy language, man. Like, that's rough. And he's describing a fair portion of the early part of his book is describing being a young boy with a terrible, terrible father. It's painful, and he doesn't seem to like himself. He didn't seem to like himself, and by all accounts, he still doesn't appear to like himself. And I get the same sense from many of these LooksMaxxers guys. There's a performative excess in the look how good I am that is compensation for a deep lack of. God, I sound like a leftist when I say this, but it's the leftists. I think are misapplying this. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah.
like they're going almost in the other direction. But
is that but is it tied in with a type of what the social credit, in a non dystopian sense, but what the social credit is now, and it's a type of social credit that we cannot relate to because of having a different experience growing up, going back and back. So it's okay, is it an expression of low self-esteem, if you want to just put it in plain, old school 1970s therapy language? Is it low self-esteem driving them to go to those extremes of trying to look good, or is it just that that's considered the thing, that's the good thing to do?
Yeah. Well, this is where I like to lean more in the direction of Plato than Aristotle. Aristotle's great, don't get me wrong, but the what social credit is an attempt at quantification of honor and reputation.
Yeah.
And honor is good. Honor is good, but it's the second best. Because the order of values is represented in Plato's hierarchy of the states. The best state is the aristocracy, and an aristocracy is not whether one man is in charge or a few men are in charge, or a democracy is in charge. Maybe an aristocracy could be a democracy in Plato's world, but what's important is that aristocracy is ruled by what is best. It's ruled by quality and virtue and excellence. That's the defining feature, more so than whether it's a monarchy technically or an aristocracy, and that there's a few different people in charge. Below that, still good, but below that is the timarchy or timocracy, which is ruled by honor, ruled by reputation. And this is like Sparta, basically. And that's, fine. But the point is that honor and reputation is a heuristic placeholder for quality. It's supposed to be a stand-in representation for the thing itself, for quality, but it's not quality. It can be gamed, it can be manipulated, and below honor is money. Money is a heuristic stand-in and placeholder for and visual representation of honor in many ways. And so you have a, sort of an image of an image, and now we're beginning to get kind of far away from actual quality, from actual value. And this separation compounds in the degrees of pathology we can arrive at. And this is why I think there really is a comparison between someone hitting their face with a hammer to try to reshape their face to female bulimia, women thinking they're just they've replaced the concept of attractiveness with the concept of skinny. There's a conceptual flop there. They think I just need to be skinny. Skinny is why do you need that? Why is that good? And even attractive is like a stand-in for healthy and fertile and will live a long time and all this other stuff. So you've got an image of an image, and you're getting compounding degrees of minute corruption that can lead people down some very weird paths. And I think it's less the Aristotelian excess and more the Platonic separation from the real that draws that connects the LooksMaxxers to like
Separation from the
the
real.
trans crowd.
So if social credit represents a type of honor situation, honor is usually it's about an in group, right? And an in group implies connection to that group, because the value is the value, the individual is valuing the group and seeking value to be valued by the group, as a collective thing. And so are these LooksMaxxing kids, are they actual representatives of what is valuable within the group, or are they stand out, extremely pathological, entities that are basically getting attention because it's a freak show? Right? I mean, I don't know if we have that answer.
Kind of both, right? Because part of we do value people looking good, whether we want to admit it or not, we do. And when the LooksMaxxers say people care about looks, like, they are correct.
Yeah.
But it is also true that we find something a little repulsive about people who care that much about appearances. And I mean appearances in the Platonic sense, not even in the like visual looks sense. I mean creating the facade of something. And I do want to put a little asterisk here, because while it's important, while it is true that honor is a kind of social credit, what most people mean when they talk about social credit is a government system. And like, the insidious thing about that, like government-based social credit systems, is that like, part of it is us ascribing honor and reputation to our government, which I think for most people currently is at a pretty deep low right now. For reasons we've talked about in previous shows. But so like for them to say, oh, we get to give out social credit scores, it's like, the fuck you do. Who are you? But I mean, there is still value and utility in having a kind of social credit, whether that's quantified or not. Probably better if it's not quantified, honestly. Just a reputation. What are the Google reviews like for your company? Those get gamified. They do, but they're still valuable, You can't trust them too much, though. Your trust in them should be inversely proportional to how gamified they are. So you should be paying attention to how people are teaching these things.
It is gamified. The one company that I work for like a part-time supplemental gig, to certain groups of the employees, like they have these meetings and they're like, all right, I want to see, we need to see 5 4-star or more Google reviews this week. You need to go after those.
What we should do next week? We should do a whole hour-long podcast stream of just us telling all 5 viewers to just hit the like and subscribe over and over again. Go to our books, leave 5-star reviews. Doesn't matter if you buy them or not. Just leave 5-star reviews on all the books, right? Just repeatedly berate people to gamify our stuff. That's like what
we'll link to it. We'll link to it, and every time one comes up, a bell rings.
Yeah, we need some Pavlovian system of like positively rewarding. We'll do an anime girl, something, since they're into anime stuff, right? Derealization. Oh God, I disgust myself. Anyways,
so but and this LooksMaxxing thing, though, it seems to me that it is an internet phenomenon, because like I go to the gym near here. It's near a very large and somewhat prestigious, very prestigious university. 90% of the people at the gym I go to are Gen Z, very healthy college kids, right? And what I see, all the looks, their style, whatever. But what I'm seeing is fashion, and not like, I'm not really seeing that uncanny sort of situation in real life, you know.
Yeah. And it can be very subtle at times, and I'm sure like the extreme cases are extreme cases. You know, there's only one clavicular, there's only one androgenic.
Who's next?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure that there are hundreds of these guys out there, and I'm sure they're all very loud, but there are probably not tens of thousands. You know, so it is a small movement, and it's probably not one that anyone needs to really be worried about, you know. But it is illustrative because the way that these Platonic corruptions of copies of copies or appearances of appearances can go as we separate ourselves further and further in an iterative fashion from like true quality and virtue and excellence. It's not like one rabbit hole that it takes you down. It's an infinite number of rabbit holes facilitated by an infinite and growing number of new technological and sociological means. So it's
there's other versions of the same. You know, you have the optimizers and the the health maxers. That one guy, the guy, the sleep in an oxygen chamber.
Oh Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson is like the key, influencer of people that are doing that for
the don't die guy.
Yeah, health.
Who looks like a vampire.
Yeah, and the nose strips, and we talked about that earlier. Yeah,
I think because the tricks and some of the lessons learned from these communities can be valuable, and in a way, I don't even want to push back too hard because some of the greatest breakthroughs in understandings of things come from extremists. It comes from people who are like, I'm going to go really far down a rabbit hole that no one else has any business caring about. And I'm going to write about it. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to do videos. And cool. Great. You're advancing human knowledge. That's nice. But there is an attitude that has proliferated, I think, and LooksMaxxing is a symptom of it, and it's in the language, because LooksMaxxing is not the only maxing. There's all kinds of people who are X-maxing. They're something maxing, and maybe that's the problem. Like, why are you trying to? And it comes from gaming language. So even the language is derivative from our derealized context, because it comes from specifically a phrase min-maxing. There's a way you can set up characters in particular kinds of games where there's trade-offs and qualities. And if I go all in on stealth and 0 on health, I can make a glass cannon that in the right context is just obscenely overpowered. Or I go all in on these 2 traits and completely ignore everything else. And that creates just this stack that is just ridiculously overpowered. And it's an approach to gaming that comes from a world that is not real. And people think, well, maybe reality is like the simulation, and they apply that logic, and it turns out, there are other factors involved. Dang it. I made a ton of money and I blew up my relationships. Shit. But like that whole attitude of min-maxing, and which is just anything that you go all in on, anything that you max is going to be minning on other things axiomatically, because you've only got 24 hours in a day.
And retard maxing is like the version of maxing is where you go all in on something important or intellectual.
I think retard maxing is the Gen Z response to maxing. Actually, that's the one I'll get behind, because retard maxing is, I'm just gonna be, man. That's like Heidegger Dasein for like 140 IQ pretending to be 80 IQ.
But it can also
being
imply
present and showing up.
Retard maxing can also imply sort of, like, an autistic approach to something, like I'm spending, I have all these other responsibilities, but I'm only going to read the Republic all day in bed.
Is that what retard maxers are doing? I might be misunderstanding the phrase then. I
I
thought
think
retard maxing was about like, man, I'm this is why I'm a millennial and not Gen Z. I don't know the lingo, man.
I think
I
I
thought
think it's
retard maxing was about just like being present and being a little bit retarded in not overthinking things and just doing
maybe
things.
it has more than one meaning, but from what I've heard, that it's like, it's the retard part is like tism. It's like, oh, I called out sick from work and I'm only Hittite clay tablet obsessed all day,
The
like
Down
going
syndrome
all
people,
going all in on something like an autistic obsession.
I think the Down syndrome people are going to have a cultural appropriation complaint against the autists. Don't, my culture isn't your costume,
Yeah,
autists. Um,
no.
anyways, yeah, and this is part of the problem of us, like Gen X and millennial people trying to understand the Gen Z lingo.
Yeah,
We might just not be grasping it, but I think there is a danger
for
to
real.
any, yes, exactly, on God, to any kind of extremity of going all in. Does it accomplish a lot for society? Yes, it does, actually. It's kind of heroic in a way, but there's a pretty serious cost. And I think people think that there's going to be this personal payoff, and there can be. That's usually an exception, not a rule. And I think there is wisdom in the Robert Heinlein admonition against specialization. That specialization is for insects. Now, Heinlein is very poetically excessive in his own way, saying an adult man should be able to change a diaper, lead an invasion, cook a 5-star meal. And it's like, what kind of Renaissance Superman do you think people are going to be? But having a balanced variety of skills, having a variety of experiences, and an appreciation of the costs and benefits of different things.
Yeah, you can say be generally competent and willing to learn is another way to say that without having to make some
And
grand
I think
statement about doing
the
everything.
the motivation to pursue that should come from the fact that different skills can be synergetic. And like, so like, suppose you wanted to be maximally attractive, right? If you were a visually 10 out of 10 versus another guy who was a 9 out of 10, but for instead of spending that last amount of time to be a true 10, he dedicated that time to learning Italian, to learning a language, or to traveling to a couple countries for a couple weeks, getting better acquainted for the world. Which one do you think other girls or guys, for that matter, are going to be more attracted to, romantically or platonically? 10 times out of 10, the second one,
Yeah.
The other skills are synergistic to attraction.
Yes.
And if you want to be really skillful as a scientist, right? If you want to study science, go all in on science. You're reading all the research, you're doing all this stuff. But you also take a class in literature, now you're a scientist and you've given up the cost of however much that literature class time took in research that now your friendly scientists have over you. But now you can write better papers than them.
Yeah.
And there are skills that are synergistic in ways that you would not necessarily expect in advance. And so the approaching life with a little bit, we all need to specialize to make money. No one makes money off just being a Renaissance man, except handymen. And I hate handymen, so don't be one of them. At least the ones that do electrical work. Please don't do that. But like, you have to specialize to a degree. But I think your general, the more skills you have, the more connections you'll see and the more synergies you'll discover that feed onto each other and make you a better person, even in a domain that you might have wanted to specialize in. Now, this is limited, obviously. You're not going to be a better nuclear scientist by only going halfway to nuclear science and going halfway into poetry. Like you have to understand the limits. But I think beginning with a story of what's meaningful is probably the most important place to start. And that seems to be the big thing that's lacking with these guys. There doesn't seem to be a grand narrative that gives meaning to other decisions. So they may as well pursue dopamine and avoid cortisol. And that's all there is to it. And that seems like a very sad story. I don't see how you avoid the cortisol in that world.
Well, in any world.
Yeah. Yeah. But you become very easy to cortisol spike if that's all it is, you know.
I mean, maybe, you know, becoming some kind of Buddhist monk and sitting around breathing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an ugly story, though.
It's a boring story.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions? Oh, Karate Elvis made another comment. He said, I think also that period pills change the physiological attraction of women and thus starting like more feminine men. Male gaze versus female gaze sounds so odd. That is absolutely true. There is probably no greater generational harm to our society than hormonal birth control. That's my belief anyways. I think it has robbed women of a great deal of connection to their what they would otherwise value naturally. It has changed men's physiology by changing women's physiology. It basically puts them in it removes the ovulation state, and we pick up on this. We're like ants. We're always like picking up on each other's hormonal presence of it. And this is where the LooksMaxxers aren't like totally wrong in talking about cortisol and oxytocin and all these things. Like they matter a lot, but like it changes how men and women relate to each other and how we feel about each other. I wonder, you know, people have been wondering a lot about like, why is men's testosterone down like 40 to 50% in the last, 50 years. I would bet a decent amount of money that a lot of it is female birth control. And I'm not even talking about what's in the water supply. I'm talking about how it affects the women that surround men in day-to-day life. If you're walking around and past women who go through natural ovulation cycles, your testosterone will be higher, because you pick up on that, and it makes you a little bit more competitive, a little bit more energized, and so forth. So,
and combined with isolation, combined with men having less groups of male friends, which is also another less trigger for the same, like because whatever the men's chemical substances also inspire other men to be more like men.
Yes. Yeah. And the solution is not to like jack your test up like massively in the opposite direction either. Like again,
there are people test maxing
Aristotelian balance. Yes. The and the tren and the anavar and whatever else it is. I'm not as knowledgeable as some of the other people in our like world online are, but it has its place. The fact that we've lost a tremendous amount of testosterone, like maybe we should fix that to some degree. Maybe it is healthy to supplement that a little bit. But vitamin A is good for you. Too much vitamin A will kill you. So there's probably a healthy line there. Yeah. Anyways, that's going on an hour about LooksMaxxing. At the risk, I feel like we're at the risk of giving these people too much attention. Is there anything else you can think of to say about the LooksMaxxer phenomenon?
Zoolander did it better. Give up, bro.
That feels like the perfect place to edit. I don't have anything else to add on to that. Zoolander did it better. Cold steel or blue steel, whatever it was.
Some kind of steel.
Yeah. Steal his steel. Anyways, thanks so much for listening, guys. Take care, and we'll talk to you next week.
Stay solar.
Stay solar.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Journal of Solar Culture. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and leave us a comment. The first volume of our journal is available in paperback and now, finally, on Kindle. Pick it up in our store or on Amazon.